So I wanted to talk about prayer today. And so in Matthew 7, 7 through 8, it says, "Ask and keep on asking, and it will be given you. Seek and keep on seeking, and you will find. Knock and keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you." And I was thinking about this earlier this week, and I'm quite simply, the reason I think a lot of our prayers, a lot of my prayers have never been answered is because I just don't ask enough. Too often I've fallen into the trap of, this idea, this entitlement mentality. For me, I ask once and, expect something to be done. And sometimes that happens, sure. I believe God wants to know if we're serious or not. Now, of course, He sees the beginning from the end. And that's just one of those many mysteries. That's not, that's above my pay grade. I don't need to worry about that. Sometimes we have to keep knocking on the door, right? We don't just knock once and walk away, right? Sometimes our prayers don't get answered because we're just not persistent enough, right? And what I've learned is that it's not always about the answer to the prayer that actually matters. It matters, it has merit. The perseverance that we put into our prayer, the consistency that we put into our prayer, the patience we put into our prayers, things like that. That's part of the reward, right? I might pray for something, get it, and maybe lose it later, or maybe things fall apart later. Sometimes that's not the point. Again, sometimes the answer to prayer is not always the point, right? It's, dare I say, the process of prayer, right? It's who am I while I'm knocking on that door, Am I being patient enough to continue to pray for something over and over again? I might have to pray for something for days, for weeks, for months, maybe even years. Am I willing to do that? And while that's happening, if I am willing to do that, if I am willing to practice that type of perseverance, right, I'm building character, I'm building strength, I'm just getting better at prayer, I'm gaining a lot more experience, I'm getting more clarity, right? For me, every prayer helps recenter me. I still get a lot of benefits. Now, I want to be careful because it's not all about us, it's not about me, it is still about God. It's still about Christ. All right, so I want to be careful here, right? It is the truth, though, right? We do get benefits. And the thing is, as we build, just to keep it simple, as we build that character, right? And we gain that life experience and we practice certain principles while we're praying for days, months, or longer, right? The things that we learn, the person we become while we continue to knock on that door, right, we can then carry all of that, right, into the answered prayer, right? Like if I'm praying for, what, maybe to plant a church or start a ministry, let's use obvious examples. Well, those things are probably going to require a lot of patience, a lot of perseverance, a lot of commitment, right? And that's why sometimes I have to just knock on the door over and over and over again. And hopefully, I'm practicing those principles along the way, right? Because that's the character I will take into sort of like the next stage of things. And for a long time, I didn't realize that because I wanted things now. I wanted God to just, God doesn't grant wishes, He answers prayers, right? And again, I think oftentimes prayer takes consistency, right? Sometimes, it's not always a one and done thing. Right? Now it might be, depending on the situation in life that I'm in. God might need me to do something immediately. Yeah, that's possible. God wants me, He doesn't want me to be a child. And I think one of the ways that we actually mature spiritually is through consistent prayer and being patient and learning to persevere and learning to stay committed and learning to, stay the course with prayer, right? And especially if it is a specific prayer. If I'm praying for a spouse or, lately I've been praying about receiving the kingdom as a child, right? And some things have happened, some I've been gaining some clarity. I'm still praying for it, So I think that's important to remember. It's not always a destination, right? It's about the journey. We need to, the things that I learn along the path while I'm walking down that path, right? It's that stuff, the things that I learn, right, while I'm waiting, when I don't want to wait, right? Because Yeah, I'm impatient, right? That's one of my biggest character defects. All of those principles, all that character I build, and all that spiritual fortitude and spiritual maturity that I build while I'm praying day in and day out, month in and month out about something, maybe even, maybe even longer. Well, when I do get, assuming, let's say, the prayer comes to fruition, then I'll be ready for it, right? If God just granted my wishes at every turn, I wouldn't grow a whole lot, you know? In fact, I'd probably take God for granted, because then God would just become like a vending machine to me. I walk up and tap the buttons, he spits out my prayer chips, and that's not conducive, right? That's not conducive to spiritual maturity, to our sanctification. So for me, it's important to remember that, right? It's the things that I learn along the way, right? It's not always about the answer to prayer. It's the prayer itself. The many prayers over and over again. The fact is, sometimes we just have to keep knocking on that door over and over. Sometimes we just got to bug God. And you know what? He wants us to, right? He can handle it. It's okay. So this is something that I was thinking about this week, and like I said, got some clarity about. So I hope this helps someone. Take care.